2. Bill Moody loved this business, and it was what made him tick.
There you see Percy Pringle.
Very stereotypical Southern wrestling manager.
That's me!
But Bill Moody was Paul Bearer.
Paul Bearer was perfect for The Undertaker because the real life William Moody was a funeral director.
This is one of those perfect storms. He loved being a character. That was where his heart and his passion was at.
Oh, when the funeral bell starts to toll.
He was part of what made Undertaker Undertaker. He was part of what made Kane Kane.
My man, Paul Bearer!
There was only one Paul Bearer, and that's what made it so special. It was meant to be.
A dark page in the annals of America has been written to the crack of an assassin's bullet. A nation mourns, the world grieves. The man who became 35th president less than 3 years ago is dead.
When President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. That had a big impact on me.
A whole people is lifted up in common sorrow. Down this avenue of sadness, they bring President John F. Kennedy, martyred hero, to lie in state under the great dome of the Capitol.
I'll never forget watching the pomp and circumstance of his funeral ceremonies. And the same year, my grandfather passed away. That was the first memories I'd ever had of going into a funeral home and seeing it's gonna sound funny, a real live dead person. There was just something about it. So after that, I wanted to be a funeral director. So God help anything that died in my neighborhood. If a dog got hit by a car, if I saw a frog laying on the ground died, they had a funeral. I'd make them a little casket. I had a little cemetery out behind my house, and if it lived and died, I gave it a funeral. And it was about the same time that I found wrestling, and I fell in love with that.
Gulf Coast Tag Team title match at Mobile's Expo Hall tonight.
I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, where it was called Gulf Coast Wrestling.
The Gulf Coast Wrestling Association of Mobile, Alabama.
Bill Moody was not alone in his instant attraction to professional wrestling and developed a bond with other local fans who shared his dreams of superstardom.
Everybody knows Freebird Michael Hayes.
The name is Michael P.S. Hayes, and the P.S. stands for Purely Sexy.
There's only one, thank God. Michael's from Pensacola, Florida, which is just right down Interstate 10 from Mobile. So we all watched the same wrestling. And we'd end up putting up the rings and carrying the wrestlers' bags to the building, anything we could do, because we wanted to be in the business.
Bill was the wrestling fan that was always there from the get-go, that loved to take pictures, loved to share pictures, who just loved being a fan of the business.
We was just a couple kids from the South that wanted to be wrestlers. We basically trained ourselves. We'd go to the matches and then go home and go out in the backyard and do what we saw. We'd run each other into pine trees and slam each other on the ground, and we eventually learned how to do it right.
There's Big Red.
After a few times getting slammed into the hard ground, you learned how to do it right. I mean, we saw our local wrestling, and we didn't know anything else existed. Unless you were really, really, really hardcore, and of course I was really, really, really hardcore. And I was at the magazine stands every month. I knew the day that the new magazines came out. I'd cut the grass so I could get some money to have my wrestling magazines. There wasn't cable television then, so I never got to see any footage from the Garden or Chicago or from LA, but I got to see pictures in the magazines. If I only could perform in Madison Square Garden, I would just dream, you know, gosh, I want to be in the wrestling business.
That dream wouldn't die, even while Moody served 4 years in the U.S. Air Force. During that time, he would attend live shows and continued his training. In 1974, he ultimately obtained his wrestling license and began his career in the Southern Territories.
I started wrestling. I wrestled for 2 or 3 years. I was the Mask Embalmer, Mr. X. Me and a couple buddies would drive from Mobile all the way up to Memphis, Tennessee, 8 hours just to do Memphis TV, get paid $10, $15. Of course, we've spent way more in gas and food and everything else, but we were wrestlers. That's what was important about it all.
We both kind of caught Frankie Kane, the great Mephisto's eye, who was the booker of the Mississippi Championship Wrestling.
I had a match, and after my match, I came back to the back. Mephisto goes, "Have you ever thought about being a manager?" Now, you can take that 2 ways, Was my wrestling that bad that he said I should try being a manager, or did he see something, that I never thought about before? He says, we're gonna call you Percy Pringle. It was just a natural.
Reborn as Percival Pringle III in April of 1978, Moody's new persona helped him stand out in a sea of colorful characters.
He was just a perfect bad guy, heel, because he had a weird contorted face, and when he made facial expressions like raised his eyebrows, that weird looking face got a lot weirder, and it made it made you want to hit him.
Percy Pringle was finding success in wrestling, but life outside the ring soon took precedence. In December of 1978, he married his wife Diane and celebrated the birth of their son Michael the following year.
He had to make a choice about which was the best way to feed his family from an employment standpoint, and he went to be a funeral director, so he had his daddy job.
I'm a real funeral director. I have a degree in mortuary science. I'm a licensed funeral director and embalmer. They would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a wrestler and a funeral director.
Bill Moody had now successfully fulfilled his 2 childhood dreams. But after several years away from wrestling, the glare of the spotlight proved to be too tempting.
And Percy Pringle has decided to go back to his own side of the ring.
In 1985, Percy Pringle returned to wrestling, this time in Florida.
Percy Pringle is a man who never ceases to amaze me,
where he continued to hone his flamboyant, fast-talking persona.
Mr. Soley, once again the Pringle dynasty is wreaking havoc all across Florida.
En route to becoming one of the most prominent managers in the South.
I win all my matches fair and square.
The bottom line is, here's the belt, brother.
That's right.
That's the bottom line. Put the camera on my man. Put the camera on Luger.
Lex Luger, I managed him in his very first match in the business.
I want you to put the camera on my man and just sit back and watch out what a real athlete does when he works out.
And then all the other guys that became stars through the years, I was with them early on.
I want you to put the camera on the man right here, the man of the hour, Ravishing Rick Rude, the smooth operator, brother.
I started with Rick Rude in 1985. Rick was fantastic. He was another natural that our chemistry was perfect. We never had to talk to each other before the match, what we were going to do. I knew what my part was on the floor, and he knew what his part was in the ring. And we were very, very successful in Florida. And then Texas called, and we just took Texas by storm.
Ravishing Rick Rude. At his side, his manager, Percy Pringle.
I had the good fortune of working with Percy, Uncle Paul, as I'd later go on to call him, as far back as late 1988. And it was a great learning experience because Percy, one of the great mouthpieces that we've ever had in our business, so I got to see him firsthand. He got heat.
Austin and Percy holding the steel bell ringer, and he hits him on the side of the head.
That's what he was supposed to do, and he was very successful at it.
The world-renowned Percy Pringle.
A manager was strictly there to talk for the guy that he was with. played the second fiddle. And thank God I learned that fiddle well. And if you look at that list of the guys that I managed, some of them certainly wasn't handpicked. Like The Undertaker. I was his first manager in his first match at the Sportatorium in Dallas.
As you can well see, the place for sports fans in Dallas is the world-famous Sportatorium.
Paul, who was at the time Percy Pringle III, he hadn't even come out yet. I don't even think they had told him yet. I was already in the ring before Percy even run down.
Weighing in at 315 pounds from the Lone Star State, Percy Pringle presents Texas Red.
It was my first real pro match, and the fact that it was with Bruiser Brody, needless to say, I was a little puckered up.
Bruiser Brody here at the Sportatorium against Texas Red.
If you'll ask Taker, why did they send Percy to the ring with you? He'll tell you it was to show him the way back to the dressing room. Because Brody beat the dog poop out of him.
Bruiser Brody, baby. If this man wants to get rid of you, he will.
What do you do here if you're a Texas Red, Al?
Well, you just hope for the best.
That era, you just had to pay your dues. Those dues were paid many times over.
I was a little bit silly after my encounter with Bruiser Brody. The only thing he said was, kid, we got to go back up this ramp.
He's a tough dude. He was ready for another one. And he was there for a while. They put a mask on him and called him the Punisher.
Oh no, the Punisher! 6'8", 330 pounds!
You can see that it factor, you know, but it took a little while to find out what it was going to be. But when Vince made him the Undertaker, that was it.
From Death Valley, I give you the Undertaker.
While The Undertaker immediately captivated WWE audiences,
Awesome is the only word I can think to describe this Undertaker.
the same could not be said for many of the Southern wrestling territories. Once again, Bill Moody found himself at a crossroads.
My youngest son was born, so I had two sons and a family to support. And I was at a point where I said, well, maybe I need to move my family back home to Mobile and get out of the wrestling business and go back and get a real job. I don't know whether I called Rick Rude or he called me. So he goes, no way, no, absolutely not. Don't do nothing. He says, you got a pen? I said, yeah. He said, write this number down. I said, okay. He gave me the number, I wrote it down. I said, okay, whose number is this? He said, that's Vince's home number. I went, Vince McMahon? He goes, yeah. On December the 20th, my phone rang. Mr. McMahon, Percy Pringle. Oh, Percy, where you been all my life? And he says, I want to talk to you. I want to bring you up to Stanford. So I was just tickled to death. We were broke. We didn't even have enough money to buy a Christmas tree. Well, we'll get your tickets together and everything. We'll fly you up to Stanford tomorrow. The reason I remember these dates vividly is because December 22nd was me and my wife's anniversary. So I flew up on the 21st, went to this big room and sat down at a big conference table with Vince. He knew who Percy Pringle was. He had seen my stuff before. He'd seen my act before. But there was a few things that we didn't know about each other that came out during that meeting that are just unbelievable. He's looking through my resume. He looked up and goes, you're a funeral director? Yes, sir. And you know Vince. I'm intimidated as hell as anyway. What the hell are they laughing at? Long story short, when I left Titan Towers that day, I had a contract in my hand to take home. It was a very, very special time, a moment that I'll never forget.
Bill Moody had made it to the #1 sports entertainment company in the world. But unbeknownst to Moody, WWE's fastest rising star was in need of a change.
I was managing The Undertaker's brother Love. I also had my duties at the studio behind the scenes in production. Without Brother Love being at the live events, as a spectator, you're only getting half of the package. You needed someone to speak for him, you needed someone to present him, and to be with him all the time.
Don't stop at the
I chose to stay in the office, and the search, I guess, if you will, was on for an Undertaker manager.
So a couple weeks later, they called me back and said, Percy, you might not realize what all that laughing was about. He says, we were looking for a manager for The Undertaker. And here you are, an Undertaker.
It's perfect. You've got a mortician that could manage The Undertaker. And it was a match made in heaven. When someone would say, what do you want him to look like? Started to see Gomez Addams from the Addams family.
They told me that they wanted me to dress, the typical Undertaker look with the tie and the suit. Then the big change was I'd always had bleached blonde, old Bobby Heenan wrestling heel hair. Vince wants you to dye your hair cold black. And then they described the makeup they wanted me to wear with the eyes, the raccoon eyes and all that stuff. I certainly was going to do it. I wasn't going to say no, but that was tough.
His name can't be Percy Pringle. So cliche and so wrestling. I remember sitting in the locker room with Road Warrior Hawk, and he takes a look at Percy and goes, hey, how about the name Paul Bearer? Get it? Paul Bearer. I went running into Vince's office and got the name.
I will present to you a man whose services I have obtained to guide the career of The Undertaker. And right now I would like to present to you Brother Bearer.
Brother Bearer.
It is full of happy faces, aren't we?
Boy, I'll say.
Welcome, Brother Bearer. Now, Brother Bearer, what is your first name? Paul. What better man to guide the career of The Undertaker than Brother Paul Bearer?
Oh, are you looking for me?
Oh, God, that guy gives me the willies.
Come inside my parlor.
Out of the casket. They're burying him.
Once we started together, our chemistry was just perfect. I just became Paul Bearer.
You've fallen into our trap.
Paul Bearer was fun.
As my Undertaker puts the final touches on your coffin.
He was over the top, but he was still real in his character.
Oh, yeah.
You can make him serious, you can make him jolly. He can take you on rides up and down that very few characters could. Bill Moody was Paul Bearer. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the two.
Paul Bearer looking around for that body bag. There it is.
Paul Bearer Undertaker was always a combo. You didn't see him without me or me without him. We were always together. We traveled together. We stayed together.
The Undertaker and Paul Bearer.
Paul Bearer really acted as a manager for The Undertaker. Rented the car, made the travel arrangements, made the hotel reservations. There was a genuine kinship there between Undertaker and Paul Bearer that you felt.
We were just the best of friends.
But we were so opposite ends of the spectrum. Paul Bearer had the creepy, squeaky, loud voice. And then I didn't say much, but when I did, it was low, slow.
Rest in peace.
Paul could do the gist of the interviews, and then I could come in at the end. It was such a contrast. It was worked out great. And then, of course, the urn came in.
What does Mr. Bearer have in his hands?
That's the urn.
I felt naked without having anything in my hands. When I was Percy Pringle, I carried a walking cane. So I had to have something in my hands, and just all of a sudden, an urn popped in my head.
What is in that urn? You're the guy that's supposed to find that out.
Being in the funeral business, it was easy for me to get an urn. All I had to do is call a buddy and go down to his funeral home and get an urn, which is what I ended up doing. And it was just a natural thing to have, which we certainly worked into storylines.
He draws power from that urn. There's something in there that motivates this man.
He lifted the urn up, you know, Undertaker felt the power. And it just happened so organically. I don't think the Undertaker, I don't know if it takes off at the speed that it does without a Paul Bearer.
With Paul Bearer by his side, The Undertaker continued his ascent to the top of the card, facing off against Hulk Hogan for the WWE Championship.
Everybody is focused on this. Eyes and ears of the world watching this one. He's going to try to plant him with a tombstone. 1, come on, 2, get out. We got a new world champion.
He beat Hulk Hogan, because that didn't happen in those days, especially for somebody who'd just been in the company a year.
1 year removed from nearly calling it quits, Bill Moody had become a permanent fixture on WWE's worldwide stage.
Welcome to Los Angeles, California. Welcome to Star Spangled WrestleMania 7.
This is my first WrestleMania. The Undertaker and myself, we were interviewed by Regis Philbin. Oh my God, I was just so intimidated.
This guy must be tall.
I'm scared to death.
I can't get over it. Now, what are you doing with that measuring tape? Huh?
38.
Oh, come on now, look. You don't have to take any measurements.
The atmosphere of WrestleMania.
Look at this man. Look at that man.
I don't have the vocabulary to explain what it's like.
Suplex from the outside. Oh, what a beauty. Tombstone City. No! That's impressive.
I used to say, if I could just work the garden one time, I'll retire, I'll quit. I'll get out of the business, I'll never go back.
Sort of a hush has fallen over Madison Square Garden.
First time me and The Undertaker worked Madison Square Garden, we got back to the dressing room, and the first thing I asked him was, when we're back here again?
Rest in peace! Rest in peace!
Paul loved being in all these places, going to Wembley Stadium.
Over 80,000 fans welcome you to the grandeur of SummerSlam!
He took the time to like, wow, this is really special.
What's this? Oh my God. That is a hearse.
When I walked through the curtains, it almost it took my breath away, you know, just. Here's a country boy from Mobile, Alabama, in London, England, just to perform in front of that amount of people in another country. There's just no words to describe it.
And it all was so special to him, and he took that in more so than I did. He helped me appreciate some of the things that we were able to do that I kind of just took for granted and didn't take time to smell the roses on, you know. I'm so thankful for that.
And from then, it was just whoosh, like a space shuttle.
Undertaker! Now it's time for him to arise!
What in the world is this? The Undertaker! Diesel has seen a ghost! Unbelievable!
Taker carried this company on his back, and I was hanging on those black coattails as tight as I could.
For 6 years, Paul Bearer and The Undertaker had enjoyed success as a main event tandem in WWE. But in the summer of 1996, their on-screen relationship would take an unforeseen turn.
After 5 or 6 years, there was a feeling that maybe Paul Bearer was holding Undertaker back a little bit. New character coming in, Mankind. And for Taker to take the next step in the evolution of that character, we needed to hear from The Undertaker. We needed to hear from him more. And if you're going to hear from The Undertaker more, do you really need a manager with him? Then what are they doing?
Now The Undertaker's got to gain possession of the urn, and it's over. Give him the urn.
Why is this going on?
Paul Bearer's laughing. Paul Bearer's laughing.
I don't understand at all the attitude of Paul Bearer.
Stop that! That's hideous.
I was kind of shocked.
Mankind must take possession of the urn. He has it. He is the winner. Wow.
I think we both kind of felt like it was too soon. Although it worked out perfectly.
I'm Paul Bearer, and you're not.
Those two just seemed inseparable. But Paul Bearer lent so much credibility to the Mankind character. It was like saying, this is someone you need to take note of. He was like my reassurance. He was like my rock out there. They talk about a rocket being strapped to you. Paul Bearer was that rocket.
Reunited in wrestling, Mick Foley had emerged as a top superstar with Paul Bearer by his side, just like The Undertaker before him.
You're an instant star when you're matched up against The Undertaker.
You in a top physicality. They're all over each other.
And you take The Undertaker's manager and make him your mouthpiece. That's Undertaker death being sprinkled on Mankind with the association of Paul Bearer.
For the next year, Paul Bearer and his growing list of associates would continue to battle The Undertaker. But in the fall of 1997, the Dead Man and the Mortician would embark on a journey that would rewrite sports entertainment history.
We needed an opponent for The Undertaker. And looking at the roster, you had Brett, you had Shawn, that were smaller guys. Yes, they could have great matches, but there was nobody that was a threat. It wasn't a monster that you could match up with The Undertaker. It was originally thought of, okay, we just need a character, we need a one-off for a battle with The Undertaker. Little did we know.
The storyline was that there was a fire at the family funeral home where I worked for The Undertaker's parents. We said that there was a brother that got burned up and killed in the fire, which was Kane.
You burnt the funeral home to the ground. You killed your family, Undertaker. He's alive. Kane is alive, Undertaker. Kane's alive. I swear, it's the truth.
Me and Undertaker had talked about having a brother. You know, we'd be on the road and we'd discuss different scenarios.
When I came in as Isaac Yank and DDS, Paul and I got along really well. I think that he saw early on, too, that I was someone that eventually was going to play a big part in Undertaker's career. There were a lot of questions about me still, though.
Here comes Big Daddy Cool right now.
Call him whatever you like. That's not Kevin Nash.
I'd had a couple failed gimmicks before Kane, and I remember one time that Paul and I were pulling into a hotel, we were just talking about something. You know, he told me that they weren't sure that I could pull this off.
It's all over. Now will come the tombstone. No. Oh my God, wait a minute. It's Paul Bearer. It's Paul Bearer. And that's gotta be Kane. Oh my God, he just ripped the door off its hinges. The Undertaker is that his younger brother. The Undertaker set up for the tube, driven down to the canvas. Listen to this response.
Paul was really proud because they're like, they didn't know if you could dribble the ball. Not only did you dribble the ball, but you put it behind your back and started doing tricks with it, which really meant a lot to me.
This monster comes out and rips the door off the hinges. It was a spark that we all needed. Kane needed in his career, and Paul Bearer and I needed to keep us relevant and fresh. This is a crucial point in all of our careers.
What a beautiful family portrait this is!
Paul was an integral part of that whole thing.
The heated rivalry between two brothers with a fiery past.
His contribution that will go down in WWE history as the greatest story ever told, and the storyteller was Paul Bearer.
Paul Bearer just hit the mid-round machine. What is going on?
On camera, Paul Bearer captained the ever-changing journey between all three men. But behind the scenes, it was clear that Bill Moody was still just a kid living out his dreams.
What is this for?
Making of Mania.
The making of Mania? Oh no.
If you thought Paul was evil on camera, he was something else behind it. He was a prankster extraordinaire.
That's what it's all about. Yeah.
Playing a rib on somebody was one of his favorite things to do.
Now these doors.
I'd always do something to joke around, you know, either backstage or at ringside. You know, I was a ribber, you know, I like to have some fun.
Paul was always telling a joke, messing with someone.
Where's he? He's nearby. If you ask me the wrong question, he's gonna set you on fire.
I just started as Kane, so I'd always wear a towel or a ski mask when I get to the arena. Paul would drive, he would take care of me. Paul tells me he's not feeling good, he wondered if I could drive. I'm like, sure, man, no problem. And here I am in my ski mask, and all the people start pointing and go, there's Paul Bearer and Kane. He rolls down the window and starts screaming out in his Paul Bearer voice, it's a miracle, Kane can drive. And I'm just like, oh, dude.
My Kane will beat you into pieces. Oh, the sledgehammer broke.
The only thing I think he loved more than wrestling was Paul Bearer loved George Jones and carried 5 or 6 8x10s in his briefcase. Just in the rare chance we crossed paths in an airport somewhere, one of these days, I'm gonna beat him. I'm gonna see him, I'm gonna be ready. He didn't care how much ribbon he took. Later on in life, he finally got to meet him and got passes to all of his shows.
The Undertaker didn't like cucumbers, so Paul would always get a glass and put a cucumber at the very bottom of the glass, and then put the ice and whatever Undertaker was drinking on top of it, so that you'd get down to the very end and Undertaker would take that last drink and look and see the cucumber and then
Backstage, Paul was very well liked. He was in the good graces of everybody. Everyone respected him, everyone liked him. Everyone played along with his jokes.
Anybody seen The Undertaker? Get away from here!
Throughout the late 90s, the over-the-top theatrics of the duo's on-screen personas continued to shock audiences.
You may now kiss your bride!
But as the business began to evolve, so too would The Undertaker.
What the hell? What the hell is that? What is this? My goddess! It's The Undertaker! What? The Undertaker is whooping ass! Choke slam to hell! Look out, Vince!
After a decade as the Dead Man, The Undertaker became the American Badass. And that meant Paul Bearer was no longer along for the ride.
Undertaker was dressing in leather and riding a motorcycle and stuff. You didn't see me around. I guess they couldn't find a sidecar I'd fit in.
Paul helped out backstage. He helped out with appearances and different things and booking extra talent. He was actually at the gorilla position before anybody walks out onto the stage, goes through the curtain. Last person you see is there.
It was an interesting time because I know he enjoyed being backstage, but he loved being a character. That was where his heart and his passion was at. He'd been a loyal guy, and that was, I think, the way they were trying to say, okay, we want you here. We want the knowledge that you have and to help young guys.
With his character on hiatus, Moody still contributed to the business he loved. That changed in 2001 when his wife Diane was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Diane getting cancer, that was a big blow to him, and I was concerned about him. He loved her so much, and there was never, ever anybody else besides Diane for him.
I wanted to stay home with her and take care of her. I disappeared for a little while and kind of put wrestling on the shelf there for a while.
Paul had been gone from the company, and as we were looking at the 20th anniversary of WrestleMania, huge deal. Going to be back in Madison Square Garden, and when you're looking at major attractions for WrestleMania 20, got Undertaker. Could we bring the Dead Man back? Undertaker was not really high on that. He's like, God, I can't go. You're taking my character backward. Mark didn't want to come back as The Undertaker, but we saw a new version of The Undertaker. This is The Undertaker reincarnated. Once we got him convinced of it, it was actually Undertaker's like, Paul's got to be with me then.
6 months prior to the 20th anniversary of WrestleMania, WWE reached out for Paul Bearer, but the now 50-year-old Moody wasn't ready to return.
Pearce had a problem with his weight, and I think that got out of control when Diane got cancer, which kind of probably led to some depression moments.
As soon as you are inactive and you're not moving around, then, hey, it's easy for that weight to come on, and unfortunately, that's what happened with Paul.
Embarrassed by his weight of 525 pounds, Moody refused multiple phone calls from WWE executives.
Vince looked at it as, if Paul Bearer is so big that he's having trouble getting up and down, we need to save his life first. Let's take care of the human being first. If he can come back and do the rest of it, then great.
In October of 2003, WWE signed Moody to a new contract, which included a signing bonus that covered the cost of the gastric bypass surgery he desperately needed.
Hideous face! He's holding that urn!
Bill Moody had returned to the stage he loved, in the building he dreamed of performing in as a child.
A very surreal environment that we are all experiencing here in the Garden. Kane is obviously beside himself. The dead man and Paul Bearer live. And it's a pile driver.
I think that when you go back to WrestleMania 20, it was a little bittersweet. After the fact, you'll notice Paul Bearer didn't get into the ring with The Undertaker. The reason he didn't get in the ring with The Undertaker is that he couldn't. Paul couldn't get up the stairs. That was the realization of, okay, we're doing all we can here, but it's a lot longer road than anybody thought. And the more that we tried to continue it, the more the realization was that Paul can't do it. You love the human being, Bill Moody, love the character, Paul Bearer, but he just couldn't do it anymore.
Moody's return only lasted a few months. He returned home to Alabama to manage his funeral business. He continued to make occasional appearances for WWE, all while caring for his wife Diane. Until 2009.
I lost my wife to breast cancer. We were married 30 years. And just the fact that we were married 30 years in this business, that says something right there. There's not a lot of us around.
He was a great family man. His kids meant the world to him, and his wife. It really took a toll on him when Diane passed.
And I decided I wanted to take some time off and step back from death every day, which I needed dearly.
Bill Moody had lost the love of his life. In 2009, the mortician put the funeral business behind him. But his love for wrestling remained as strong as ever.
That's the father of destruction. That's Paul Bearer.
When Percy would come back here and there and not just sitting at home in a house where Diane no longer was, I'm sure it was a great diversion.
They snuck me into the building. The fans didn't have a clue.
It always felt like you're back in the good old days, like a good pair of shoes. You know, they feel really good and feel like that's where you should be in the best possible way.
People were like, oh no, Undertaker and Paul Bearer back together again. This is gonna be great. And it was fun.
It's always fun to make a comeback after you've been gone for a little while. And the people remember you. And then another generation gets exposed to you. All these young kids that had heard their parents talk about Paul Bearer and The Undertaker, they'd never seen me before because they were too young. Now they remember.
It became the, oh my God, you killed Kenny kind of storyline with Paul Bearer, where as many times as they could, they would go back to how are we going to end Paul Bearer's career.
No, I wasn't feeling that. My wind-up was a little bit off. It should be more like this.
You'll never see him again. Until next time.
It was fun. So much fun. I couldn't have done it if I wasn't having fun. If I wasn't having fun, I'd stayed home.
Kane, come get me, Kane! Kane! Kane, my God, Kane. How much longer do you need?
Moody loved playing Paul Bearer, but he never forgot where he came from. On March 2nd, 2013, he attended the annual Gulf Coast Wrestlers Reunion in Mobile, Alabama, where other guests said he had difficulty breathing and looked weak. 3 days later, Bill Moody died of a heart attack. He was 58 years old.
I was in Albany, New York. We had just finished the show, and I think it was Mark Carano that came up and told me and Vince that Percy had passed away. You know, when you go back to the Mississippi days, it was Percy, me, and Terry Gordy, and we were like a trio, you know, the Three Musketeers. And it's weird when you start losing the people that you started with and that you love.
Michael Hayes called me, and he's the one that let me know he passed. We had had such a storied history together.
It was a big loss. I mean, Paul Bearer is a huge part of The Undertaker on a professional and personal level.
Just sadness, because sadness and a little way happiness, because he was back with Diane, and you knew that he really missed her and wanted to be with her again. So Paul was a good one, and losing him hurt big time.
It was Kane who texted me the sad news. I was in my car, and I was driving to Indianapolis for a meeting, and I just remember putting Mobile, Alabama into my GPS. It came up as being 700 miles, and I went, yeah. It's not a matter of could I do it, I had to do it. I felt like there were probably 3 people who had to be there from the WWE roster, and that was me, Undertaker, and Kane.
I remember going to his funeral. People had written and sent flowers from all around the world. I mean, it was just amazing. And you realize that, you know, he would keep in touch with people, that they weren't writing and sending flowers because they were fans. They had become his friends.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise as we pay our respects to the late Paul Bearer.
He saw WWE, professional wrestling, as this great big family. And you know, he was just naturally in the middle of it, and that's what he loved. And that's, I think, not only why he loved being around the guys, but he loved being around fans as well.
While friends and family mourned Bill Moody's death, Paul Bearer was still by The Undertaker's side. This time, as the focal point of a rivalry with CM Punk, heading into WrestleMania 29.
Hey, wait a minute. Oh, no, with the urn! Punk with the urn to the back of Kane's head!
At this point, I have a little bit more say on whether things happen or not. And I was conflicted. Initially, I felt like it was too disrespectful.
Undertaker! Oh, yes! Oh!
But then we kind of come to the conclusion, like, Paul would love this.
This is disrespectful.
We're using the character. We're not talking about Bill Moody. We're talking about Paul Bearer.
Oh, look out! That's Punk! It is!
And he would absolutely love it. You know, that his character is still relevant at this point and that we're using it.
That's what he would have wanted. I mean, that's what he would have wanted. They built an entire WrestleMania angle around Paul Bearer. And, you know, some folks are like, oh gosh, that's disrespectful. It's like, no, that's the biggest compliment and that's the biggest tribute that you could have given him.
I would put my life on it. Bill Moody was sitting up in heaven looking down going, oh yes, loving that after he is gone and left this earth was still a major part of a WrestleMania main event storyline.
He would have enjoyed it, not only being part of an angle, but a part of an angle involving The Undertaker for WrestleMania. I thought it added to the match, and I thought it just helped further secure Paul Bearer's place in WWE history.
The following year, Paul Bearer's legacy was solidified when he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame.
When I inducted Paul Bearer into the Hall of Fame, it was one of the greatest honors of my career, because without Undertaker, without Paul Bearer, there wouldn't have been a Kane. And being able to at least pay that back in some little way and let the world know how much I appreciated him.
Out of all the great performers that Paul Bearer ever managed, I'm the one who owes him the most. Because if it hadn't been for Paul Bearer, there never would have been a Kane, and for that I am forever grateful.
It was the only time I've ever made any appearance at Hall of Fame. When he was being inducted, this boys there, and that's when I came out in his honor.
Just want to say on behalf of the whole Moody family, we want to thank the whole WWE universe for being able to share our father with all of you. And of course, we can't leave until this final thing is said. Oh, yes!
At that time, I'm not doing interviews, and I don't share a lot of my personal stuff anyway. So it was a way for me to show my friend the proper respect that I felt like I owed him. And how better to do it than be The Undertaker to his Paul Bearer one last time.
William Alvin Moody, wrestler and manager, family man and mortician. He fulfilled his two childhood dreams and created a legendary Hall of Fame career as Paul Bearer.
I've had a very, very blessed life, in the ring and out of the ring. Just being blessed to be the little kid from Mobile, Alabama that wanted to get in the wrestling business, and he did.
Look at that puss, would you? My goodness, what a kisser.
Paul was one of those people that combined being in the business with being a fan. He loved the business probably more than anybody I know. He's part of the show. And in the end, that's what William Moody was. He was a showman, he was an entertainer.
You know nothing at all about the dark side. Oh, yes, you're right.
He lived, he ate, he breathed this business.
Oh, yes, I f***ed up. Isn't it?
This was rehearsal.
Bill Moody loved pro wrestling, loved it.
And take a look who's leading the way. The ghastly-looking Paul Bearer.
I think William Moody's legacy is that if you take a character
Oh, why don't you come on down now for a visit?
and put your heart and soul into it, it can succeed beyond your wildest dreams.
Once again, the Pringle Dynasty is wreaking havoc all across Florida.
Since I knew Percy from the beginning, I knew what he wanted and dreamed of. He reached those dreams. He really did.
Despite the fact that he wasn't an in-ring wrestler, he's one of the greatest characters in WWE history.
We had such a short interaction to start with, and then come around full circle and be such an integral part of my career. I couldn't be more thankful to know Bill the man and Paul the character.
Why does everyone want to know what's inside our sacred earth?
It's been so many years. I've been so many places. I've had so many experiences all around the world. Knowing what's happened through the years, my two boyhood dreams of being a wrestler and a funeral director, and putting them together, and look what we have.
Paul Bearer, commanding the spirit of the Undertaker.
Oh, yes! Paul Bearer, of all things.